Amelia Wilson's eyes fluttered open to the harsh glare of the Texas sun, her cracked lips parting in a silent prayer for water that wouldn't come. The dusty road to San Antonio stretched before her like a death sentence, each step more impossible than the last. 3 days without food, and her body was surrendering to the inevitable. The drought of 1874 had taken everything her family's farm outside of Houston, her parents to fever, and now it seemed determined to claim her too. At 22, Amelia had survived war and Reconstruction, only to face starvation in what was supposed to be a time of rebuilding. Her threadbare dress hung from her frame, once sturdy boots now rubbed raw against her blistered feet. San Antonio appeared on the horizon like a mirage, storefronts and saloons shimmering in the heat. Amelia forced one foot in front of the other, each step a monumental effort. The trading post sign swayed in the hot breeze, its promise of supplies and salvation just yards away. But those final steps proved too much. The world tilted sideways as her knees buckled beneath her, the dusty boardwalk rising to meet her face. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a pair of worn leather boots rushing toward her. Wyatt Nielson had seen his share of hardship in his 30 years, but the sight of the young woman collapsing outside Hargrove's trading post still managed to shake him. He'd been loading supplies into his wagon when he spotted her stumbling down the street, looking more ghost than human. When she fell, he didn't hesitate. Miss, can you hear me?" Wyatt cradled her head, noting the unhealthy pallor of her skin and the prominent bones of her face. He'd seen this before during the lean years after the war hunger, pure and simple. "Someone fetch Doc Miller." He called over his shoulder, lifting the unconscious woman with ease. She weighed almost nothing in his arms. Henry Hargrove, the trading post's owner, held the door open as Wyatt carried her inside. "Who is she?" the older man asked, concern etched across his weathered face. "Don't know. Looks like she's been on the road a while." Wyatt gently placed her on a bench near the wood stove. "Got any broth, Henry? She needs something in her stomach when she comes around." While Henry shuffled off to his back room, Wyatt studied the woman's face. Despite the grime and exhaustion, there was a delicate beauty there: high cheekbones, a small nose, and long lashes that fanned against her cheeks. Her chestnut hair might have been lustrous once, before dust and deprivation had dulled it. "Here," Henry returned with a steaming cup. "My wife's chicken broth. Always keeps some warming." Wyatt nodded his thanks, then gently patted the woman's cheek. "Miss, can you hear me? Need you to wake up now." Her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of summer sage. Confusion clouded them before fear took hold and she tried to sit up. "Easy now," Wyatt soothed, his voice low and steady like he'd used with a spooked mare. "You're safe at Hargrove's trading post in San Antonio. You collapsed outside." "Water," she whispered, the word barely audible. Wyatt supported her head as she took small sips from the cup he offered. "Slowly now. Got some broth here too once you're ready." After a few moments, he introduced the broth, encouraging her to take tiny sips. Color gradually returned to her face. "Thank you," she managed, her voice stronger. "I'm Amelia Wilson." "Wyatt Nielson," he replied with a tip of his hat. "Cattle rancher outside of town." Doc Miller arrived then, his medical bag in hand. The doctor's examination was swift but thorough, confirming what Wyatt had already surmised. "Dehydration and malnutrition," Doc Miller announced. "Nothing that rest and regular meals won't fix." He turned to Amelia. "Young lady, when's the last time you had a proper meal?" "3 days ago," she admitted. "And it wasn't much." Wyatt's jaw tightened. 3 days without food in this heat was a death sentence waiting to happen. "She needs a place to stay," the doctor said, looking pointedly at Wyatt, Before Wyatt could respond, Mrs. Hargrove appeared from the back room. "She can stay with us tonight above the store." Amelia shook her head weakly. "I can't impose. I have no money to—" "Nonsense," Mrs. Hargrove interrupted. "We don't turn away folks in need. That's not the Texas way." "And I'll bring more food in the morning," Wyatt found himself saying. "Got fresh eggs and milk at my ranch. Could bring some beef, too." Amelia's eyes met his, a flicker of something hope, perhaps lighting them from within. "Why would you help a stranger?" Wyatt shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable under her gaze. "Like Mrs. Hargrove said, it's the Texas way." As Amelia was helped upstairs to rest, Wyatt completed his purchases with unusual haste. Something about the woman's quiet dignity in the face of such desperation had moved him. He'd seen too many people broken by circumstance since the war ended. Something told him Amelia Wilson wasn't broken, yet just bent by forces beyond her control. The next morning, true to his word, Wyatt arrived at the trading post before dawn, his saddlebags laden with provisions. He'd spent half the night thinking about the woman with the sage-green eyes, wondering what series of misfortunes had brought her to the brink of starvation on the streets of San Antonio. Mrs. Hargrove greeted him at the door. "You're early, Mr. Nielson." "Figured she could use a proper breakfast," he replied, unpacking fresh eggs, milk, and a paper-wrapped package of smoked beef. "How is she?" "Better after a night's rest and some supper. She's washing up now." Mrs. Hargrove accepted the provisions with a knowing smile that made Wyatt unnecessarily adjust his hat. "Mighty kind of you to bring all this." Wyatt cleared his throat. "Just doing what's right." When Amelia appeared at the top of the stairs a few minutes later, Wyatt hardly recognized her. Mrs. Hargrove had clearly provided clean clothes, a simple blue dress that hung a bit loose on her frame, but was a vast improvement over yesterday's rags. Her hair was neatly combed and secured in a simple braid, and her face, though still pale, had lost the ashen quality that had frightened him. "Good morning," she said softly, her eyes finding his immediately. "Mr. Nielson, you came back." "Said I would," he replied, suddenly conscious of his rough appearance after the early morning ride. "Brought some breakfast fixings. Sit down, both of you, Mrs. Hargrove instructed, already bustling about her small stove. "Coffee's hot." Over breakfast, Amelia slowly shared her story. The drought had destroyed her family's cotton farm outside Houston. Her parents had succumbed to fever within weeks of each other, leaving her alone with mounting debts. The bank had taken the land, and with no family left, she'd started toward San Antonio, where she'd heard there was work to be found. "What kind of work were you looking for?" Wyatt asked, pushing a second helping of eggs toward her when she finished her first. "Anything honest," she replied, hesitantly accepting more food. "I can sew, cook, clean. I kept accounts for my father, so I have some education." Mrs. Hargrove exchanged a look with her husband. "Well, I could use help around the store. Been getting harder to manage the inventory with these old bones." Hope flickered across Amelia's face. "I wouldn't want charity, Mrs. Hargrove." "It's not charity if you're working, girl," Henry Hargrove said gruffly. "Small room upstairs, meals, and a modest wage. That sound fair?" Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. "More than fair, thank you." Wyatt found himself unaccountably pleased by this development. "That's settled then. I'll be in town again in a few days. Maybe you'll have the place reorganized by then," he said with a slight smile. "I'll do my best," Amelia replied, returning his smile with a tentative one of her own. Wyatt tipped his hat and took his leave, though he found himself looking back at the trading post more times than necessary as he rode away. There was something about Amelia Wilson that had lodged itself under his skin, a quiet strength beneath her vulnerability that called to something within him. As promised, Wyatt returned to town 3 days later, telling himself he needed supplies that couldn't wait. The truth was, he wanted to see how Amelia was faring. When he entered the trading post, he found her perched on a ladder, carefully arranging items on the highest shelves. The simple brown dress she wore still hung loose on her frame, but her movements were stronger, more assured. "Careful up there," he called, causing her to start slightly. Amelia looked down, a genuine smile spreading across her face when she recognized him. "Mr. Nielson, I was beginning to think you'd forgotten us." "3 days is hardly forgetting," he replied, watching as she descended the ladder with care. "And I think after saving your life you might call me Wyatt." A blush colored her cheeks. "Wyatt, then. And I'm Amelia, not Miss Wilson. How are you feeling, Amelia?" He studied her face, pleased to see some color had returned to it. "Much better, thanks to you and the Hargroves." She brushed dust from her hands. "Mrs. Hargrove is an excellent cook, and I'm learning the inventory system. It's good to be useful again. Seems like you're settling in well." "I am," she hesitated. "I never properly thanked you for what you did that day. I don't think I would have survived much longer." The raw honesty in her voice caught him off guard. Anyone would have done the same. But it wasn't anyone, it was you. Her eyes held his for a moment before she looked away. "What can I help you find today?" Wyatt rattled off a list of supplies he needed, some legitimate, others invented on the spot to prolong his time in the store. As Amelia helped gather his items, they fell into easy conversation. He told her about his ranch, the herd he was building, and his plans to drive cattle north later in the summer. She shared stories of her life before the drought, painting a picture of a once happy family and a childhood spent running through cotton fields. When it came time to pay, Wyatt added a small bag of sugar candies to his purchase. "I don't remember those being on your list," Amelia said with a small smile as she wrapped his parcels. "They're not for me." He pushed the bag toward her. "Thought you might enjoy something sweet." The gesture seemed to fluster her. "That's very kind, but I couldn't." "You can and you will," he insisted gently. "Consider it a welcome gift to San Antonio." Their fingers brushed as she finally accepted the small bag, and Wyatt felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. He cleared his throat and gathered his purchases, suddenly eager to be back in the familiar territory of his ranch where women with sad eyes and brave smiles didn't confuse him. "I'll be back next week," he found himself saying at the door. "Need to order some fence posts." "I'll look forward to it," Amelia replied. And Wyatt couldn't help but believe she meant it. Over the following weeks, Wyatt found increasingly creative reasons to visit the trading post. Each time, Amelia looked healthier, her dresses fitting better as proper nutrition restored what hunger had stolen. Her eyes brightened when he entered, and he found himself sharing thoughts and observations he rarely voiced to others. The Hargroves watched their growing friendship with knowing smiles. Mrs. Hargrove made a point of inviting Wyatt to stay for lunch whenever he appeared, creating opportunities for the two to converse beyond the constraints of business transactions. On one such afternoon in late June, as they enjoyed cold lemonade in the shade behind the trading post, Amelia broached a subject they'd danced around for weeks. "Why haven't you married, Wyatt?" she asked, her directness catching him by surprise. "A successful rancher like yourself must have had opportunities." Wyatt considered his response carefully. "Came close once before the war, Elizabeth Winters, daughter of a neighboring rancher." He took a long sip of lemonade. "I enlisted, asked her to wait. She didn't." "I'm sorry," Amelia said softly. He shrugged. "It was a long time ago. After I came back, there was too much to rebuild. The ranch had fallen apart while I was away, didn't leave much time for courting. And now," her gaze was steady, though a slight flush colored her cheeks. "Now I'm sitting here having lemonade with you," he he replied with a half-smile. "What about you? No sweetheart left behind in Houston?" Amelia shook her head. "There was a boy once, son of another farmer. We were sweet on each other, but his family moved to California when the drought started. He asked me to come, but I couldn't leave my parents. They were already sick by then." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the town. "Would you like to attend the Independence Day celebration with me?" Wyatt asked suddenly. "Town's planning fireworks and a dance. Thought you might enjoy it after all you've been through." The smile that bloomed across Amelia's face was answer enough. "I'd like that very much." The 4th of July arrived with cloudless skies and sweltering heat. Wyatt spent the morning fussing over his appearance in a way that would have earned him merciless teasing from his ranch hands had they witnessed it. He finally settled on his newest shirt, a deep blue that contrasted with his sun-browned skin, and his least worn pair of denims. He even polished his boots, an effort typically reserved for Sunday services. He arrived at the trading post precisely at 6, as agreed, to find Amelia waiting on the porch. The dress she wore, a cheerful yellow with white trim, was clearly new, and she'd arranged her hair in an elaborate style he hadn't seen before, with curls framing her face. "You look beautiful," he said before he could think better of it. Her cheeks flushed. "Thank you, Mrs. Hargrove helped with the dress. A belated payment for my work," she insisted. Amelia smoothed the fabric self-consciously. "You look quite handsome yourself." Wyatt offered his arm, and they set off toward the town square where festivities were already underway. Bunting in red, white, and blue decorated the buildings, and a band played patriotic tunes from a hastily constructed platform. Children darted between adults, waving small flags and clutching penny candy. Many townsfolk greeted them as they strolled through the square. In the weeks since her arrival, Amelia had become a familiar face at the trading post, earning respect for her diligence and friendly demeanor. Several people expressed pleasure at seeing her out enjoying herself, and more than a few gave Wyatt knowing looks that made him tug at his collar. They sampled pies at the baking contest, applauded the children's recitation of the Declaration of Independence, and cheered during the sack races. As evening approached, the band shifted to dance tunes, and couples began to gather in the center of the square. "Would you care to dance?" Wyatt asked, extending his hand. Amelia hesitated. "It's been a long time. I'm not sure I remember how." "That makes two of us," he admitted with a grin. "We can stumble through together." And stumble they did, laughing as they missed steps and apologizing when they trod on each other's toes. But as the music continued, they found their rhythm, moving more smoothly together. When the band struck up a waltz, Wyatt drew her closer, his hand steady at her waist. "This isn't so difficult after all," Amelia said, looking up at him with shining eyes. "Depends on your partner," Wyatt replied softly. "Some things just come natural with the right person." The air between them shifted, charged with unspoken feelings. Amelia's lips parted slightly, and Wyatt found his gaze drawn to them. He leaned closer, nearly closing the distance between them when the first boom of fireworks startled them apart. Overhead, brilliant colors exploded against the darkening sky. The crowd gasped and applauded, faces turned upward in wonder. Wyatt used the distraction to guide Amelia to a quieter spot at the edge of the square, where they could watch the display without the press of bodies around them. "I've never seen anything like it," Amelia breathed, her face illuminated by flashes of red and gold. "Me neither," Wyatt replied, though he wasn't looking at the sky. The wonder on her face captivated him more than any fireworks could. When she turned and caught him watching her, he didn't look away. "Amelia," he began, his voice low, "I need to tell you something." She turned to face him fully, her eyes questioning. Yes, these past weeks, seeing you grow stronger, getting to know you, it's been the best time I can remember having in years. He took a deep breath. I know it hasn't been long and you're just getting settled here, but I can't help feeling I feel it too, she interrupted softly, saving him from fumbling words. Whatever this is between us, I feel it too. Relief and joy surged through him. Wyatt reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. May I call on you properly then? No more pretending I need supplies every other day, Amelia laughed, the sound like music above the distant explosions of fireworks. I'd like that. Though I'll miss inventing reasons why you urgently need more coffee beans. As the final bursts of color faded from the sky, Wyatt gently drew her closer. This time, there were no interruptions as he lowered his head and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning at first, then deeper as Amelia responded, her free hand coming to rest lightly on his chest. When they finally parted, both were slightly breathless. I've wanted to do that for weeks, Wyatt admitted. I'm glad you finally did, Amelia replied, her smile shy but certain. They walked back to the trading post hand in hand, stopping often to steal more kisses in the shadows between street lamps. At her door, Wyatt reluctantly bid her goodnight, promising to return the following day. As he rode home under the star-filled sky, Wyatt realized he hadn't felt this hopeful about the future since before the war. The woman who had collapsed at his feet just weeks ago had somehow revived something in him he'd thought long dead. True to his word, Wyatt began formally courting Amelia. Their courtship became the talk of San Antonio, that summer the prosperous rancher, and the brave young woman who'd arrived with nothing but her determination to survive. 3 times a week, Wyatt would arrive at the trading post in the evening, sometimes with small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, a book of poetry, wildflowers gathered from the prairie. They would walk together through town, share meals at the small restaurant near the square, and gradually learn the contours of each other's lives, hopes and fears. Amelia thrived under the Hargroves' care and her own hard work. By August, she had completely reorganized the trading post's inventory system, implemented a ledger that tracked sales and orders more efficiently, and won over even the most skeptical customers with her genuine warmth. You've made yourself indispensable, Wyatt commented one evening as they sat on the trading post's back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. Hargrove told me business is up 15% since you started working here. Amelia smiled, pleased by the praise. It feels good to be useful again. After losing the farm, watching everything my parents built slip away, I wasn't sure I'd ever find my footing again. Wyatt took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. You're the strongest person I know, Amelia Wilson. I don't feel strong, she admitted. Most days I'm just grateful to the Hargroves, to you especially. She turned to face him. You didn't just feed me that day, Wyatt. You gave me hope when I had none left. You would have found your way, he said, though the intensity of her gaze made his heart race. You're too stubborn not to, perhaps, but I'm glad I didn't have to. She leaned closer, initiating a kiss that quickly deepened. When they broke apart minutes later, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling in love with you, he whispered. Might as well admit it now. Might as well, she agreed, her voice equally soft, since I've already fallen in love with you. The admission changed something between them, adding depth and certainty to their courtship. They began making plans, tentative at first, then more concrete. Wyatt spoke of improvements to his ranch house, casually mentioning how the second bedroom would make a fine sewing room. Amelia started setting aside a portion of her modest wages in a tin behind her bed, a nest egg for their future. As summer faded into autumn, Wyatt faced a difficult decision. The cattle drive he'd planned to Abilene couldn't be postponed any longer if he wanted to secure the best prices for his herd. It would mean at least 6 weeks away from San Antonio, away from Amelia. "I have to go," he explained as they walked along the river one Sunday afternoon. "The ranch depends on this income to make it through the winter." Amelia nodded, her expression resolute though her eyes betrayed her disappointment. "I understand. Your livelihood can't wait. I've been thinking," Wyatt said, stopping to face her, "about what happens when I return." "Oh." Her voice was carefully neutral. Wyatt took both her hands in his. "I don't want to court you anymore, Amelia." Her face fell, confusion and hurt flashing across her features. "I want to marry you," he continued quickly. "If you'll have me." Relief replaced hurt, followed swiftly by joy. "Are you proposing to me, Wyatt Nielson?" "Doing a poor job of it, apparently," he replied with a nervous laugh. "Let me try again." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Amelia Wilson, I love you. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Wyatt stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around once before setting her on her feet and kissing her thoroughly. "I don't have a ring yet," he admitted when they broke apart. "Thought we could choose one together when I return. Maybe take a trip to Austin where they have more selection." "I don't need a fancy ring," Amelia assured him. "Just you, safe and sound after your drive." They agreed to announce their engagement before Wyatt left, and to plan for a wedding shortly after his return, before winter set in fully. The Hargroves were the first to receive the news, expressing delight but little surprise. "Saw it coming the day he brought you those sugar candies," Mrs. Hargrove declared with a wink. The following Sunday, they announced their intentions after church services, receiving congratulations from the entire congregation. The town's response was overwhelmingly positive. Amelia's determined rise from destitution had earned her respect, and Wyatt's standing as a fair and hard-working rancher made him well regarded. The day of Wyatt's departure arrived all too quickly. He stood with Amelia outside the trading post at dawn, his foreman and ranch hands respectfully waiting with the herd at the edge of town. 6 weeks, he promised, holding her close. "I'll be back before the first frost." "I'll be waiting," she replied, fighting tears. "Please be careful." "Always am." He kissed her once more, then mounted his horse. "I love you, Amelia." "I love you too." She stepped back, summoning a brave smile. "Go on now, before I change my mind and beg you to stay." With a final tip of his hat, Wyatt rode off to join his men and the waiting cattle. Amelia watched until they disappeared from sight, then returned to her room above the trading post, allowing the tears she'd been holding back to fall. The weeks of separation proved harder than either had anticipated. Amelia threw herself into work at the trading post and preparations for their future home. She sewed curtains and linens, collected recipes, and even began a small quilt in the evenings. The activity kept her hands busy, though her heart ached with Wyatt's absence. 4 weeks after his departure, a letter arrived by courier from Abilene. "My dearest Amelia, the drive has been successful beyond expectations. Prices are higher than last year, and our herd arrived in good condition despite some trouble with rustlers near the Red River. No one was hurt, thankfully. I find myself thinking of you constantly. The stars here remind me of the night we watched fireworks together, though they're not half as beautiful as the light in your eyes. I've enclosed something I hope you'll accept until I can provide better. It belonged to my mother. My father carved it for her during their courtship. It's brought our family luck and love for 2 generations now. I'll be home sooner than expected, perhaps by the time you receive this letter. Keep watch for me." All my love. Wyatt enclosed in the letter was a small wooden pendant on a leather cord, carved in the shape of a heart with their initials intertwined. Amelia immediately placed it around her neck, touching it reverently. True to his word, Wyatt returned to San Antonio just 3 days after his letter arrived. Amelia was working in the trading post when the bell above the door jingled, and she looked up to find him standing there, trail-worn but smiling. With a cry of joy, she abandoned the customer she'd been helping and flew into his arms. Wyatt lifted her off her feet, spinning her around before capturing her lips in a kiss that left little doubt of how much he'd missed her. The customer, Mrs. Patterson, the minister's wife, cleared her throat loudly, bringing them back to awareness of their surroundings. Amelia pulled away, blushing furiously. "Forgive me, Mrs. Patterson. I was just greeting your fiancé," the older woman finished with a knowing smile. "Perfectly understandable, dear. Though perhaps a bit less enthusiasm might be appropriate in public." Wyatt set Amelia down gently, though he kept one arm firmly around her waist. "Apologies, madam. Got carried away seeing my bride-to-be." "Well, when is the happy day to be, Mrs. Patterson?" inquired, her initial disapproval softening into genuine interest. Wyatt looked down at Amelia. "Sooner rather than later, I hope." "We were thinking 2 weeks from Saturday," Amelia supplied. "A simple ceremony at the church if Reverend Patterson is available." "I'll speak to him myself," Mrs. Patterson promised. "He'll be delighted." With a final indulgent smile, she completed her purchase and left them alone. The moment the door closed behind her, Wyatt pulled Amelia close again. "I missed you something fierce," he murmured against her hair. "I missed you too." She touched the wooden pendant at her throat. "Thank you for this. It's perfect. It looks right on you." His fingers traced the carved heart. "Been in my family for years. My mother would have loved you." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "I wish my parents could have met you. They would have approved, I know it." "Then we'll just have to honor their memory by building a happy life together," Wyatt said, wiping away a tear that escaped down her cheek. "Starting with making our wedding official. Are you sure 2 weeks is enough time?" "More than enough," Amelia assured him. "I don't need anything fancy, Wyatt, just you." The following 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Mrs. Hargrove and several women from the church helped Amelia transform her plain brown Sunday dress into a wedding gown, adding lace trim and tiny pearl buttons salvaged from Mrs. Hargrove's own wedding dress. Wyatt purchased a new suit from the tailor in town and arranged for a proper wedding supper at the hotel restaurant. On the morning of her wedding day, Amelia woke before dawn, too excited to sleep. She stood at the window of her small room above the trading post, watching the sun rise over San Antonio and marveling at how much her life had changed in just a few months. From the brink of starvation to a bride, it seemed almost unbelievable. Mrs. Hargrove arrived early to help her prepare, bringing a bouquet of late autumn wildflowers tied with white ribbon. "Something old," the older woman said, pinning a cameo brooch to Amelia's dress. "Belonged to my grandmother. Mrs. Hargrove, I can't possibly—" "Hush now. I have no daughter to give it to, and you've become like family to us." She squeezed Amelia's hands. "Something new, that would be the dress. Something borrowed." She presented a lace handkerchief. "My wedding handkerchief, and something blue." From her pocket, she produced a blue ribbon. "For your hair." Tears threatened to spill over as Amelia embraced the woman who had become a surrogate mother to her. "Thank you for everything. I don't know what would have happened to me if you and Mr. Hargrove hadn't taken me in." "The Lord works in mysterious ways," Mrs. Hargrove said simply. "Now, let's get you ready. Can't keep that handsome rancher of yours waiting." The church was filled to capacity when Amelia arrived. It seemed the entire town had turned out for the occasion, a testament to how quickly she'd been embraced by the community. Henry Hargrove waited to escort her down the aisle, having agreed to stand in for her father. As the church piano began playing the wedding march, Amelia took a deep breath and stepped into the sanctuary on Mr. Hargrove's arm. The faces of friends and neighbors blurred as her gaze fixed on Wyatt, standing tall and proud at the altar. The love shining in his eyes as he watched her approach nearly took her breath away. "Who gives this woman to be married?" Reverend Patterson asked when they reached the altar. "Her mother and I do," Mr. Hargrove replied, the traditional response bringing fresh tears to Amelia's eyes as she thought of her parents. He placed her hand in Wyatt's and stepped back. The ceremony itself was brief but heartfelt. They exchanged simple vows and rings. Wyatt had indeed purchased a proper gold band for Amelia during his trip to Abilene. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Patterson concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Wyatt's kiss was gentle but full of promise, mindful of their audience yet unmistakably passionate. When they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Nielson for the first time, the church erupted in applause. The celebration that followed at the hotel was joyous, with music, dancing, and more food than Amelia had seen in one place since before the drought. As she and Wyatt moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes, she couldn't help but marvel at how full her heart felt, how completely her life had transformed from desperation to abundance. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Nielson," Wyatt said as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. "I was just thinking how lucky I am," she replied, smiling up at him. "That day at the trading post I thought it was the end of everything, but it was really just the beginning." "For both of us," he agreed, drawing her closer. "I went to town for supplies and found the missing piece of my life instead." As twilight deepened, they bid farewell to their guests and departed in Wyatt's wagon for the ranch that would now be their home. The journey took just under an hour, with Amelia nestled against Wyatt's side, his arm securely around her. The ranch house was modest but well built, set among cottonwood trees with a view of rolling pastures. Lights glowed in the windows. Wyatt had sent his housekeeper ahead to prepare for their arrival. "Welcome home, Amelia," Wyatt said as he lifted her from the wagon. To her surprise, he swept her into his arms and carried her across the threshold. Inside, the main room was warm and inviting, with a fire crackling in the stone hearth. A table was set with cold supper and a bottle of wine, thoughtful preparations for their homecoming. "It's perfect," Amelia whispered, taking in what would now be her domain. The furnishings were simple but solid, the space clean and well-ordered. Already she could envision the small touches she would add to make it truly theirs. "It's better now that you're here," Wyatt replied, his voice husky with emotion. "Been too empty for too long." Their first night as husband and wife was a tender discovery of each other, with Wyatt guiding Amelia through her initial nervousness with patience and care. In the intimacy they shared, the final barriers between them dissolved, cementing their bond in the most elemental way. Afterward, as Amelia lay in his arms watching the firelight dance across the ceiling, she felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time since losing her parents and her home, she felt truly safe, not just from physical hunger, but from the gnawing emptiness of having no place to belong. "I love you," she whispered, turning to look at her husband's face in the dim light. "And I love you," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Sleep now. Tomorrow's the first day of our life together." The months that followed were a time of adjustment and deep joy as Amelia and Wyatt established their life together. Amelia took to ranch life with determination and enthusiasm, learning the rhythms and requirements of their household. She transformed the house with small, thoughtful touches: curtains at the windows, a colorful quilt on their bed, herbs growing in pots on the kitchen windowsill. Wyatt proudly introduced his wife to neighboring ranchers and their families, establishing their place in the wider community. Amelia's intelligence and warmth won her acceptance, even among those initially skeptical of her humble arrival in town. Her history became less a source of whispered gossip and more a testimony to her resilience. Winter settled over the ranch, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. The cozy evenings by the fire, with Amelia sewing or reading aloud while Wyatt cleaned his tack or whittled, became cherished rituals. They learned each other's habits and preferences, the thousand small accommodations that form the foundation of a strong marriage. When spring arrived, bringing fresh green to the pastures and wildflowers to the prairie, Amelia had news to share. She waited until they'd finished supper one evening, the last light of day painting the kitchen in golden hues. "Wyatt," she began, her hands twisting nervously in her apron, "I have something to tell you." He looked up from his coffee, concern crossing his features at her serious tone. "What is it? Are you unwell?" "Not unwell, no." A smile bloomed across her face. "Quite the opposite, I'm with child. The baby should arrive in late autumn." Wyatt stared at her for a moment, processing her words. Then he was on his feet, gathering her into his arms with a whoop of joy that echoed through the house. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you pleased?" Amelia asked, though his reaction left little doubt. "Pleased doesn't begin to cover it." He knelt before her, pressing his lips to where their child grew. "I never thought I'd be so blessed," he murmured. "First you, now this." The summer of 1875 passed in preparation for the new arrival. Wyatt expanded the house, adding a proper nursery adjacent to their bedroom. Amelia sewed tiny garments and blankets, her neat stitches forming a tangible expression of her anticipation. News of the impending birth spread through the community, resulting in a shower of gifts and advice from neighboring women. As Amelia's body changed to accommodate their growing child, Wyatt's protectiveness increased. He insisted on hiring additional help for the house, despite Amelia's protests that she was perfectly capable of managing. "You collapsed from hunger when I met you," he reminded her gently. "I promised myself then that you'd never know one again. That includes rest, especially now." Amelia conceded, recognizing the love behind his concern. Maria, the 16-year-old daughter of one of Wyatt's ranch hands, joined the household as a helper, proving a blessing as Amelia's energy waned in the later months of pregnancy. October brought cooler temperatures and the final preparations for the birth. Wyatt insisted on bringing Dr. Miller out to the ranch to stay for the final week of Amelia's confinement, unwilling to risk any complications. "You're being excessive," Amelia told him with fond exasperation. "Women have babies every day without doctors in attendance." "Not my wife," Wyatt replied firmly. "Not with our first child." His concern proved warranted when Amelia went into labor 2 weeks earlier than expected, on a night when an autumn storm lashed the ranch with wind and rain. The labor was long and difficult, stretching through the night and into the following day. Wyatt paced the hallway outside their bedroom, flinching at each cry of pain from within, praying harder than he had since the war. Finally, as evening approached again, the distinctive cry of a newborn pierced the air. Dr. Miller emerged from the bedroom some minutes later, his face tired but smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. Nielson. You have a son. Healthy and strong, lunged as you can hear." "And Amelia?" Wyatt asked, his voice hoarse with anxiety. "Exhausted but well. She's asking for you." Wyatt entered the bedroom to find Amelia propped against pillows, her face pale but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up as he approached, tears of joy in her eyes. "Meet your son," she said softly, folding back the blanket to reveal a tiny face, eyes scrunched closed, wisps of dark hair plastering his head. Wyatt sat carefully on the edge of the bed, overcome with emotion as he gazed at his child. "He's perfect," he whispered, "just like his mother." "Would you like to hold him?" Amelia asked. With trembling hands, Wyatt accepted the precious bundle, marveling at how small and vulnerable his son was. "What shall we call him?" "I thought perhaps Thomas, after my father," Amelia suggested. "Thomas Henry Nielson." "Thomas Henry," Wyatt repeated, testing the name. "It suits him." He looked from his son to his wife, his heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. "Thank you for this gift, Amelia, for everything. We've come full circle," she said, reaching to touch his face. "From that day when you fed a starving stranger to this moment, our family beginning." Wyatt leaned forward to kiss her gently, mindful of her exhaustion. "I promised you'd never go hungry again. Little did I know how abundantly that promise would be fulfilled." As autumn deepened into winter, the Nielson family settled into their new rhythm. Thomas, called Tommy by his adoring parents, thrived, growing stronger each day. Amelia recovered her strength more slowly, but by Christmas was fully herself again, though forever changed by motherhood. Their first Christmas as a family was a quiet affair, with only the Hargroves joining them at the ranch. As they gathered around the table, Wyatt proposed a toast. "To family, those present, those in our hearts though gone, and those just beginning." He smiled at Tommy, sleeping peacefully in a cradle near the fire. "And to hunger satisfied in all its forms." "To hunger satisfied," Amelia echoed, her eyes meeting his with perfect understanding. The years that followed brought changes and growth to the Nielson family and their ranch. Wyatt's careful management and expanding herds increased their prosperity, allowing for further improvements to the property, and their standing in the community. Amelia's natural intelligence and organizational skills contributed significantly to their success, as she kept the accounts and eventually began breeding horses, developing a line known for endurance and intelligence. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's determined spirit. He was joined 2 years after his birth by a sister, Elizabeth Rose, named for both Wyatt's mother and Amelia's. 2 more children followed: James William in 1879 and Sarah Grace in 1882, completing their family. Through droughts and floods, market fluctuations, and the changing landscape of post-Reconstruction Texas, their partnership remained strong. The story of their beginning, the starving young woman and the cowboy who fed her, became family lore, retold to their children and eventually their grandchildren as evidence of how fate and compassion could intertwine to create enduring love. In 1899, as the century drew to a close, Wyatt and Amelia celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Their children arranged a grand celebration at the ranch, now one of the most prosperous in the county. Friends and neighbors gathered to honor the couple whose love story had become something of a local legend. During the festivities, Wyatt drew Amelia away from the crowd, leading her to the porch where they could watch the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues. 25 years, he marveled, his arm around her waist. Though his hair had silvered at the temples and lines mapped their shared experiences on both their faces, his eyes still held the same devotion when he looked at her. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Amelia replied, leaning against him. "Other times, it seems we've always been together. Best decision I ever made was bringing you that broth at Hargrove's," Wyatt said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Never imagined feeding a hungry stranger would lead to all this. Amelia turned in his embrace to face him fully. You didn't just feed my body that day, Wyatt. You nourished my spirit when it was nearly extinguished. Every day since, you've continued that gift. And you've returned it 1,000-fold, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. The hunger in me that I didn't even recognize for family, for purpose beyond just surviving, you satisfied that completely. As they stood together watching the sun sink below the horizon, their 4 children and 3 grandchildren visible through the windows behind them, Amelia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the desperate young woman collapsing from hunger to the matriarch of a thriving family, her life had been transformed by a single act of kindness that blossomed into enduring love. "I love you, Wyatt Nielson," she said simply, the words no less powerful for having been spoken countless times over their years together. "And I love you, Amelia Nielson," he replied, sealing the declaration with a kiss as tender as their first. Today, tomorrow, and all the days were granted. In that moment, as twilight gathered around the home they had built together, both remembered the hunger that had once defined them, physical for her, emotional for him, and gave thanks for the fullness that had replaced it, a satisfaction deeper and more enduring than either could have imagined on that fateful day at the trading post.